A favorite pastime of mine is music, and of course that includes quarantine happy hour. But I also regularly enjoy the surprising pastime of watching freight and passenger trains day and night being live streamed across America by YouTube's virtual railfan channel. I offer this pastime's pros and cons in hope that I'm viewed as being of sound mind despite being a target of some ridicule for my hobby. First, the cons. No doubt many people would at once feel that the activity of watching trains competes against watching grass grow. 2. Trains are as common as bar soap, and variations are close to non-existent. 3. I'm absolutely not speaking as an advocate of either watching or riding trains. As to the riding part, I suggest train travel when it does not matter which day you arrive at your destination, as long as you leave behind any prior expectations. And number 4, well, I'm thinking. And now, the pros, the positive reasons I'm a train watcher. 1. Whenever the spirit moves me, I can virtually transform relaxation time to experience sights and sounds of American locations. Number 2, YouTube's instant rewind lets me easily locate train activity as well as repeat activities earlier in choices of places to watch. 3. Many locations offer unusually interesting special attractions such as trackside ocean, lakes, bridges like the Mississippi River, and etc. Powerful diesel locomotives pull freight cars averaging 1 to 2.5 miles long. A train's lineup, its locomotives and cars, is known as a consist and can visually be significantly variable, but also repetitive as with a stream of boxcars or tank cars. However, train car variability has been enhanced by the creative efforts of unauthorized artists. The average speed of American freight trains is 37 miles per hour and passenger trains 48 miles per hour, both slow enough to watch. Number 7, live train sounds can be entertaining. Diesel horns, wheels across cross tracks, and slack action domino sounds as a stopped train begins to slowly move either forward or backward, causing slack between the bunched up cars expand as metal on metal grinds. I obviously enjoy watching the changing scenes of weather, snow, rain, thunder, and lightning, and cloud formations, and light changes feel differently whether day or night. Number 9, train sounds and visual scenes become far more interesting when they're actually happening right there in Georgia or Ohio or California or Maine as you watch. Number 10, often passenger trains are seen parked at stations or moving slowly through stations so that I can see passengers in seats at dining tables or in winded observation cars. People actually moving through day and night hours, headed, they all hope at least, to just about anywhere across the great United States. Number 11, Amtrak, the nation's passenger rail service, does suffer, as do its passengers, due to lower priority standing versus the big freight train companies like Union Pacific and BNSF that actually own the country's train tracks. And they do treat Amtrak and Amtrak schedules as less than beloved squatters. Simply stated, passenger trains and train passengers are often seen stopped on siding tracks as monstrous diesel trains speed by with priority. This might be viewed as more of a con against train attraction, but for me, I'm never impatient as I get to see locomotives and train cars go by really up close. One more nod as to why I really do enjoy watching YouTube's virtual railfan train activity. Over the years, I've splurged on Amtrak tickets to experience grandeur across most of our country. My train excursions, sometimes in a comfy sleeping compartment, and at other times curled up with blanket and pillow on one of those double seats in an empty nighttime observation car. All of it has solidified my fascination and pleasure. One defining Christmas morning at age 4, Santa Claus, with help from Dad and Mom, thrilled me with 2 life-defining gifts. A 1941 vintage Lionel train set, steam locomotive number 2025. It actually smoked. At this point, my treasured 2025 Lionel train locomotive, its cars and tracks, are in grandfather-son Philip's storage, awaiting a chance to roll again with help from my great-great-grandsons Everett and Leo and great-great-granddaughter Olivia. And a book written in the early 20th century to focus children on optimism, entitled The Little Engine That Could. Both were among my early earthly treasures for sure, and my treasured interest in trains will never wane. Before sharing several of my treasured train travel experiences and favorite glimpses of virtual railfan US rail activity, let me say thanks to those watching, taking time to have some interest in my fascination with trains. I'll begin by recounting my most recent and most lengthy train trip from Portland, Oregon back to Dallas via Los Angeles. I flew from Dallas to Portland, and early the next morning was soon settled in my Amtrak coach seat, no sleeping compartment this time, rolling out of Portland through the fabled Steel Bridge. My 2,700-plus mile jaunt had begun. Me and my backpack, and by the way, never check a bag on Amtrak, I wandered from my seat to the dining car to the observation car, enjoying beautiful Northern California views. Amtrak has rest stops where folks can detrain to walk or simply soak in new surroundings. Reboarding after a San Francisco stop, I settled into an oceanside observation car and enjoyed grand Pacific Ocean views on my way to Los Angeles. Day and night are the same thing, sitting in an Amtrak coach seat for 3¼ days and nights of travel. Arriving late at night in Los Angeles, I changed trains to the Texas Eagle. Early the next morning, remember seeing a stunning Arizona sunrise, looking out my dining car breakfast window. Arriving in El Paso, the train track closely followed the U.S.-Mexico border, and I snapped pictures as Juarez rolled by. We had reached Texas and was in San Antonio, and that was followed by a brief trip up north, still on the Texas Eagle, to the downtown Dallas train station. Metal wheels had brought me from Portland all the way to Dallas, and the dark train's rolling wheels continued to take me north to Plano, and a Dallas bus ride got me to within 1 block of our Plano apartment. I next invite you to a look back at 3 of my train ventures. In addition to the Portland to Dallas Marathon, this chart gives glimpses of several other trips taken over many years, each ending with the, yes, that was a really great train adventure, even including trips for work and in Europe. I'll focus on the highlighted 3 favorites, with remembering stuff that happened both aboard trains and unusual circumstances happening related to beginning and ending the journeys. Max, a dear friend of many years and also a train enthusiast, had returned from a Trans-Canada rail trip. Sitting at lunch, maybe my hamburger was turning green with envy, just listening to his experience. Lunch ended with a decision and a plan for us to take Amtrak from Dallas to Alpine in southwestern Texas for a rented car tour of Big Bend National Park. Our trip to Alpine was great, as was driving the roads of the impressive park along the Rio Grande River. A full, adventurous day, we remained alert to getting back to Alpine, returning the car, and being ready to board our 4 p.m. train coming from El Paso. Once-a-day schedule really didn't allow us a miss. We made it back to the quaint train station with its wall mural ticket agent with time to spare. All seemed to be going as planned until we used the payphone to call Amtrak and learned of our return train's 7-hour delay. Others must have also called, as we had the tiny station all to ourselves. But no problem. We walked some blocks to a store, we had no car at that point, and bought what we expected to be our dining car steak dinner. Instead, snacks. Not really that bad, and many years of friendship gave us plenty to talk about. The wall mural ticket agent's little station had a restroom, a payphone, and several small little wooden benches. None of the dozens of thundering passing freight trains were ever late in arriving during our 7-hour vigil, and they were on tracks that were only a few feet away from our benches. Becoming fatigued but still positive, our overnight train trip had begun to take some hits, but sometimes things just happen and you go with them. The wall mural ticket agent never complained or even said a word about the delay. It was, I think, about midnight when our train finally arrived. We joked a goodbye to the agent and soon were rolling toward San Antonio and then home. The conductor took our tickets and assured us the train would make up some of the delay time and that our next train connection, San Antonio to Dallas, would be held until we and other passengers could continue on to Dallas. When you start to feel really, really tired, it seems like one can just better sense when rest is being too casually promised, and doubt began flooding in. On his many walks to the train's sleeping passengers, our dapper mustached conductor stopped multiple times to chat, assuring us that we would, in fact, be able to make it to our also once only daily train from San Antonio on to Dallas. No doubt all of you are already sensing at least a little small puddle of doubts in this now a questionable train look back. We arrived in San Antonio just before 5 p.m., about the same 7 hours behind schedule. There were 2 side-by-side train tracks with our friend the conductor's train on one and the other track empty. We watched his Amtrak train slowly begin rolling on to New Orleans, gradually disappearing like one of those vintage cowboy movies. We were 2 old cowboys standing on a platform next to now 2 empty train tracks, and we no longer even had a horse. The Amtrak courtesy van, packed with too many weary passengers to Dallas, also began rolling out of the train station's parking lot about 6 p.m. It's entirely possible that the Alpine train station wall mural ticket agent's grin had become just a little bit wider, and no doubt our friend, the Amtrak conductor, was again walking his train's aisle, assuring everyone that ordering the steak at dinner in the dining car was highly recommended. I don't even remember which day, or better, which night, the van finally rolled to a stop in the darkened Dallas train station parking lot. Before leaving the Alpine Big Bend trip look back, let me assure you that it was indeed a great trip at every turn, except for every one of the turns during our silent hours in the Amtrak service van. Turning now to the Vancouver train experience. There were many, many more surprising factors before this trip than the train ride itself. I'll recount this story that involves power to stop a full-sized diesel locomotive, non-prescription medication, attraction brochures when you first enter your hotel room, respect for the natural world around and beneath us, and that refreshing thrill of entering a completely unfamiliar situation. And it does involve a train, despite it being my all-time shortest rail experience. Joe and I and our rent car and maps took a ferry from Seattle to Vancouver Island for our first visit there. First-time vacation visits are always intriguing at every new situation. Checking into our hotel room after a late afternoon arrival, I noticed a traditional activities brochure on the desk. We knew the hotel was next to a nature reserve, but otherwise we needed to flavor our 3-day stay on the island with attractions, Bouchard Gardens, and the fabled Empress Hotel. However, it was that activities brochure on the desk that led to my memorable Vancouver Island train trip. Soon after checking in, I called the Vancouver Rail Experience to make my reservation for a rail trip across a large part of the island. I didn't expect the responses after sharing credit card number and location of our hotel. I got a confirmation number and a train time. Asking where I'd board the train, her response was that at the time given, I wait at the intersection of 2 street names, don't remember what they were, that were nearest our location, then flag the train to stop for me. The call ended after being told the time I'd return to that same location. My time to stop a moving diesel locomotive was shortly after lunch the next day. When I speak of our hotel room being next to a nature reserve, I really should say we were actually deeply into the nature reserve, away from any of the city life. We were actually very much isolated. I located the intersection on our map and we made plans for our first morning on Vancouver Island. After breakfast, we'd venture into the neighboring nature preserve. The morning burst forth in a blaze of glory as we began our nature walk. With no one else around, the birds serenaded us. But after only a few minutes, nature struck with a vengeance. Joe unknowingly stepped on an active wasp nest, and my lovely wife was instantly stung over and over. She set a nature reserve speed record for someone coming out of a pair of jeans. Our discomfort was terrible, even for me as a poor bystander. Our first morning had not gone well at all. Back in our room, she took Benadryl. Joe has forever been aware of her husband's love of trains, and I know now that you probably see where this unfortunately is going. She reasoned that we were doing everything possible to treat her miserable state. She said that all she really wanted to do to cope was to sleep. She obviously loved me. She is a trooper as we drove out to the nearby designated intersection. She would not leave until I had stopped that big train and boarded it. All of this was happening before cell phones. As I write this look back, even now though, I feel stung when I tell you that she was also back at the intersection at the appointed pickup time for the blessed but foolish train lover. She's forgiven me for this unwise and no doubt regrettable day. If you're by chance still watching my video, I ask you also to forgive my wretched behavior in agreeing to take a train ride. I suppose it's the only time I ever was preoccupied with guilt while riding a train. Speaking of that train ride, I'll share a bit about what happened with the train experience. Standing at the intersection near our car with my suffering wife watching over me, I heard the familiar sound of an approaching diesel train. It wasn't coming fast, but it certainly was coming big. I began waving my arms, and a diesel horn saluted my intent to get aboard. A grizzled old engineer peered down at me, then pointed to an attached ladder leading up to the cab. It was likely then that I first realized there were no passenger cars to be seen. I entered a small closet-like space with side windows and a large window separating me from the engineer, allowing me to watch his every move during the entire trip. I don't remember much about the route taken, but I did see some beautiful Vancouver Island spots in what was about a 2-hour experience. I guess I rapped on the window when I saw a car at the familiar approaching intersection. Slowing to a stop, I waved goodbye to the engineer and climbed out and down from a truly memorable train experience. I drove my beloved and beautiful but severely injured wife, who was silent from pain and Benadryl, back to our hotel. Being the amazing trooper she is, the next day we made it to the gardens and to the Empress Hotel. Our final day, Jo and her recovering stings and guilty husband left on a ferry back through the San Juan Islands and then to the Seattle airport for home. Watching live train activity on YouTube's Virtual Railfan channel does have its unusual moments. Space launch vapor trails, meteorites, full moons, animals, weather, crazy risk takers, and etc. One more interesting railroad activity that you may not be aware of is use of a process called hump yard. The overall concept uses gravity in large rail yards to expeditiously assemble complete freight train car strings from a yard's incoming trains into completely different outgoing trains headed to many destinations. A long line of individual freight cars are literally pushed up a man-made hill called the hump. Uncoupled and then spaced apart, cars are then allowed to free fall down the hump's other side and coast through a mechanism which slows each car before it's automatically switched onto dozens of awaiting tracks as a final new train is created all throughout a yard's tracks. Here's a quick time-sequenced video clip showing this unusual process. Be a tech hero and tell your friends about it at your next night out together. The first two real train trip lookbacks certainly also had unusual stuff, and delay ended as a significant factor in my Texas trip with friend Max. It just now occurs to me that none of us needy, tired passengers made any effort at all at introductions, as we all just filed into that unfortunate and packed Amtrak van 300 miles from home. My third look-back adventure, Montana's Glacier National Park, also had an abundance of the unusual. as well as its own bit of non-train related delay. Before this last train look back, 3 things. 1. As with all my prior quarantine happy hour lookbacks, I'll again say that I am aware that any of you viewers certainly has his or her own travel-related experiences that are worthy of a look back. Two, believe me when I say that my video has no fictional flavoring. It's all true. And 3, also believe me that I haven't tried to intentionally focus only on the dramatic, unfortunate, or even the unusual realities of train travel. Just imagine what would you think of yourself watching a look back about Jim just riding a train from X to Y. But on second thought, you would not be watching at all. I ask you, who doesn't glory at the sight of America's magnificent snow-capped mountains, and getting up close with them on an Amtrak train should make even naysayers admit that train travel can be supremely rewarding. My back and forth trip from Seattle to Glacier National Park on Amtrak's Empire Builder and the Southwest flight to and from Dallas was one of my most exciting excursions. Most unusual travel route. Up early in Dallas, I headed to Love Field with a small workout bag, lightweight jacket, and Southwest Airlines round-trip Dallas to Seattle reward ticket. My sleepy compartment reservation for overnight to Glacier was for a 5 p.m. departure from Seattle. I knew I'd get fresh Southwest peanuts at least 4 times with 4 plane stops to Seattle. Checking in that morning with my reward card and itinerary, the agent had remarked that I was her first passenger ever for Southwest flights all the way from Dallas to Seattle. First, flying to Phoenix, we were entertained by our captain, as multiple times he announced that the Delta flight that we could see was also bound for Phoenix, and that it was slightly ahead of our plane. Then he would add, but it really doesn't matter. Then, after several iterations of this same routine, we were told by a flight attendant to prepare for landing. Slowly taxiing to a gate after landing, his voice came on again with, "Well, folks, we did get here ahead of Delta. But that really doesn't matter." Thanks for flying Southwest. No doubt his routine was performed every time Phoenix was his trip. It really did matter to me when I got there, as my city-to-city hopping didn't have flexibility. I changed planes and left Phoenix on time. Settled in my seat, I accepted my second bag of peanuts, and now I had 2 bags as a late breakfast. This time our captain remained silent throughout the flight to Los Angeles. But instead of a prepare for a landing announcement, he said, "Folks, LAX has a security incident in progress, and we've been instructed to join the holding pattern. Just relax and we'll keep you updated on our arrival time." The incident, as it turned out, of an attempt to capture Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. However, I knew nothing about what was happening except that some of my time was now hanging in the balance right along with the plane in that holding pattern. And today's attempt at describing my unrest is that maybe I felt like I was being tossed into an ever-increasing whirlpool. As holding pattern minutes passed, I watched a lot of Los Angeles out the window. The final welcomed prepare for landing announcement restored worry about the reduced time pad. Asking inside the terminal for information on the now ended security incident, I realized others knew no more than I did. And then we did leave LA for Oakland and another bag of peanuts. My challenging itinerary of 4 flights offered no alternatives for Seattle and then an Amtrak by 5 p.m. My flight to Oakland was uneventful, but there was another bag of peanuts. My lost time at LAX loomed larger as the time passed after taking off for Seattle. I had gone from Phoenix's certainty of making my train to beginnings of another whirlpool. Unlike my usual behavior of keeping to myself when flying, I began talking with others who maybe were interested in a guy wanting an airplane to go faster so he could connect with a train. I'm sure I also started sharing my concern about the $300 plus non-refundable train ticket becoming deeper with me in that whirlpool. I've stopped counting peanut bags. I do remember well that last bag. A flight attendant handing me the bag and a Diet Coke had become aware of our passenger groupie discussions and stopped to ask where I was going on my train trip. I answered that I'd flown Dallas to Seattle to catch a train at 5 o'clock from the downtown Amtrak station. I told her, and the others listening, about the LAX Unabomber incident delaying my Oakland arrival, and now definitely was jeopardizing my non-refundable sleeper car ticket. The kind flight attendant assured me that Southwest would do its best to get me to the train on time by actually singing that line from the musical My Fair Lady. The brief musical performance was heartily applauded by my groupie. Let's have a whopper, get me to the church on time. Probably I had been reminded by someone that trains really never left on time anyway and not to worry. But I worried anyway. A few minutes later, the captain's voice began with traditional thanks for flying Southwest and apology for being late getting to Seattle. He then went on to say that he had done his best to make up time and that he was aware that a passenger was trying to make it to a 5 o'clock Amtrak train in downtown Seattle. Sympathy for my plight had now become public as we taxied to a gate. Before coming to a stop, he added, "Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for flying Southwest, and I hope everyone will let our Amtrak passenger exit first." And would you believe it? They remained in their seats, with some even wishing me well as I hurried out of the plane. With no luggage, I sprinted out of the terminal, flagged a cab, waving a $20 bill. I tried to explain to him that I had to get to Amtrak by 5 o'clock. Thank goodness he understood and we sped away. Any of you wonderful folks that are still watching and worrying along with the cab driver and me speeding down a Seattle freeway at rush hour, just relax. Good news. Outside the station, two large hands on the large old early day clock showed a straight up 5 o'clock as I ran inside. I thankfully could now even see the Empire Builder's engine and a single uniformed conductor standing back by one of the passenger cars. He yelled, "Are you Hamner?" At that point, I was willing to be anyone he needed me to be, if I could at last just begin my relaxing excursion to Glacier National Park. He and I stepped aboard together, and instantly it was really happening. We humans can certainly be a challenge at times. Less than 2 hours earlier, I was sitting on a plane wishing that I, or somebody, or anybody, would make the thing go faster. Just a half hour earlier, my fellow Southwest passengers, and not just my pity party groupies, unhooked seat belts but remained seated as I was first to exit the plane. God bless America. It's likely that without the innate kindness and unselfishness that is most of mankind, I would have silently sat in a cab watching the Empire Builder depart Seattle, and there definitely would be no Glacier Park train trip to look back on. But there I was, comfortably encased in my sleeping compartment, savoring beautiful greenery and the peaks of the Cascade Mountain Range, after having rolled past miles of the Pacific Ocean. However, as night was approaching, I was the same guy from the plane, but now wishing the setting sun would just slow down a bit. After dinner in the dining car, I slept well in the cozy bunk before enjoying a fine breakfast the next morning as we neared Glacier, Montana. Stepping off the train, I was honestly dazzled and surprised at the wintertime panoramic views of Glacier National Park in a state known as the Big Sky. A gleaming Glacier Park Lodge set a short distance above the brief but easy climb beginning at the train tracks. Despite being winter, I walked up the slight hill that was literally covered in plants and beautiful flowers, grander in my memories than even this picture. Remember now, everything is true. My planned stay was to be only 24 hours before I'd be walking back down the beautiful gentle slope to board a westbound Amtrak Empire Builder back to Seattle. The sleeper to Glacier had been my trip splurge, with a non-reserved coach seat back to Seattle, as I knew the lodge was expensive. Adding another day was the thing to do, even though being richly homeless for 2 nights. The impressive lodge in the picture offered ultra-comfortable surroundings, furnished with leather couches, fireplaces, shops, restaurants, and plenty of tall windows overlooking snow and ice-covered peaks. I knew I would be comfortable in the varied accommodations and enjoy great food. I checked my micro luggage at the desk and signed up for the park's red bus tour into the Glacier National Park the next morning. Weather at the lodge was cold, but not too uncomfortable. After the challenges shared so far in these lookbacks at rail adventures, you may be wondering if there were any such downers with Amtrak or with Glacier and Glacier Lodge. Well, yes, there were some extremely uncomfortable moments. Red bus tour driver would frequently stop the bus, use his microphone like any other tour guide to describe what we were seeing, but then at each stop following the commentary, even his attitude seemed to change. He began sort of mandating to us that all needed to briefly get out to adequately experience his real Glacier Park. A local resident likely, he didn't seem to be cold at all. We, however, had gotten beyond cold during frigid excursions surrounded by snow and ice and in the direct path of some bitter winds. Visitors with coats wisely remembered the northern edge of Montana mountains was seriously cold. Trainman wore his flimsy, worthless windbreaker when attempting to gaze at frigid peaks under increasingly dark gray clouds. Me and my coat excuse were both blue. I didn't steal anything while at the lodge, but if I had, it would have been a suitable coat in any available color. I'm glad now to have been part of those multiple miserable moments, but it felt wonderful back at my lodge accommodation with its crackling fireplaces. Staring up and out at where I had been, my hotel, in quotes, was everything I could ask for. During the brief stay, I relaxed, watched people, and also nature from a cozy distance, frequented a lobby library, and took cat naps after restaurant visits. I did kind of keep moving my location. Much colder wind and weather had followed me down from the glaciers. My second night was absolutely the best homeless night I've ever spent. Next morning, I took in the splendid lodge buffet breakfast, zipped up my ridiculous jacket, and gratefully descended back down that beautiful slope to board my late afternoon train back to Seattle. I'll end the look back by saying that my time at both Glacier Park and Amtrak travel to and from was beyond words terrific. I remember resting well that third night, listening and feeling the train's motion. The next day, re-entering the scenic Cascades through the 7.8-mile Cascades Tunnel, our nation's longest rail tunnel. I again had plenty of time to stare at the Pacific Ocean coastline. Unusual Southwest flights to Seattle had been arduous from earlier in the video, but I've long since forgotten that or anything about the Southwest back to Dallas. Did I even get peanuts again? Travel experiences, including my train lookbacks, are likely never remembered as entirely perfect or totally regrettable, with regret maybe due to late departures or arrivals, unexpected illness or expenses, poor planning, external services failures, weather, and etc. The perfect trip, however, requires no further explanation. Some might suggest that there has never been a perfect train trip, and so far in my life this was also true. Before my glacier undertaking, I'm referring only to the highlighted area in yellow when I say the perfect glacier undertaking. Before some train conductor's whistle signals an all aboard for leaving, tenderly, though tantalizingly, told tall train tales, I'll share some favorite American live train action saved from the virtual Railfan channel. I'll begin in Fort Madison, Iowa, on the shore of the Mississippi River. Eastbound trains, westbound trains, dedicated long coal train, and Amtrak's Southwest Chief passenger train, all totaling 60 to 80 trains every day, roll through Fort Madison, Iowa on 3 tracks right next to the mighty Mississippi River. The Fort Madison Toll Bridge, formerly Santa Fe Swing Bridge, was built in 1927 and is a double-decked, cars on top, trains below, swinging truss bridge across the Mississippi River connecting Iowa and Illinois. The bridge, about a mile long, is the longest and largest double-deck swing bridge in the world. Rail and car traffic are both halted when a large portion of the bridge pivots, actually swings out 90 degrees, allowing riverboat traffic east and west as the priority. These next images show the majesty of Amtrak's most beautiful train route, the California Zephyr. Chicago west to Reno, Nevada, then near Lake Tahoe area before reaching the Pacific. There are unusual great views of mountains and forest green as the train weaves slowly in and around a changing landscape. I did take this train ride in early June and kept imagining what it would be like with snow in the winter months. Thanks again for celebrating trains with me. I'm honored that my quarantine happy hour piano keys could share train music of the great Johnny Cash. Now, these recommendations I leave with you. 1. Don't fly Southwest Airlines Dallas to Seattle just for the peanuts. 2. Remember, always plan your Amtrak travel when you do not require a specific arrival time or even a specific arrival day, or any detailed awareness whatsoever of what the actual status of your train may be. It may be underway or possibly not. Number 3, with any travel activity that is or is intended to be, or even contemplation of, to be shared with anyone else, you must disregard temptation toward, even contemplation of, any advertised train excursion that appears in any activities brochure found in your hotel room upon arrival. Act immediately to conceal the brochure in your room's desk bottom drawer, way in the back, and be sure to conceal the material in some manner. And then, lest I forget, leave all your hopeful expectations behind and then get on board. But never check a bag on Amtrak. Finally, if your train trip isn't turning out to be perfect, maybe like your ice cream cone falling to the ground, well, keep smiling.